Thank you, Jess, so much for doing this today. I really
worries.
it. Obviously, it's part of our Women on Women series where we're talking to all different women across the technology sector and sort of talking to them about their thoughts, their entrance into the technology industry. Obviously, for people who don't know, you are Jess. You are an engineering manager at Checkatrade, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a few questions about, you and your background and your career. So if we can kick off, what made you want to have a career in the technology industry?
Yeah, so that's a good one. For me, I feel like I followed quite a traditional route. So I was generally always interested in tech from a young age. I did IT at sixth form, and lucky enough, when I was at sixth form, we did actually have a little bit of coding integrated into our IT lessons as well. So I know nowadays it's becoming more and more common for people in sixth form and colleges to have that coding aspect in their IT courses. I think pretty much when I was doing IT, it was still quite rare, but I was lucky I got to experience some basic introduction into coding. And I think where I really enjoyed that and the building stuff from code, that's when I thought, okay, well, what can I do after this? I always knew I wanted to go to university. So then I looked into computer science, and then I thought, okay, well, great, this is the course for me. So I obviously went into computer science and studied computer science with software engineering for a few years.
Right.
And then after university, that's when I went on to looking at graduate roles and then moved up in that role as well through the software engineering levels, which took me through to today as well.
On your courses,
yeah,
were there many women on the course with you?
So that was probably one of the biggest challenges, I think. So when I initially joined my computer science course, I think I expected there to be obviously a male-dominated presence, but I didn't expect there to be very few females, very few women, as there were. There were maybe 5 women or so on my course and 200 or so men. And that was the really scary thing about joining. And, when I joined, I almost contemplated, okay, well, is this going to be the right thing for me for a few years? Actually, I think the only thing that kept me on the course was the fact I had a very close friend from sixth form who was also a woman joining me on the course. So we were together. I honestly don't know how I would have felt if I didn't have that female friendship. It was very different, very difficult. And I can imagine and I actually noticed that other women who were also joining the computer science course, they kind of came in pairs. So they were either friends from sixth form or college, but they kind of knew someone who was joining the course and joined with them. And I think that just shows you how intimidating it is for a woman to join a course that is that male dominated, that you do need a bit of support and you do need that companionship, the friendship on your side to almost help you get through that as well.
Did you have any female lecturers?
Yeah, we did. So that was the nice thing. We did have a fair amount of female lecturers where I went at Hertfordshire University, and all of the male lecturers there were also very, very supportive. So they were really good in, giving me the confidence as well. So I remember when I had my practical classes there and I was doing coding, I had one of my my male teachers there, and he was very supportive and almost giving me the confidence saying, okay, well, you're actually good at coding. Make sure you try and pursue something in this path if you're interested in it.
That's great. That's a make or break, really.
Yeah. And I think it is really that.
That is mad. That's absolutely mad. So once you graduated and you went out to have a look, at what was out there, tell me about what it was like when you went into the market. I know obviously you landed at Rightmove. Tell me about that. What was that like there? And what did you experience whilst you were looking in the market?
Yeah, so that was obviously a very new experience coming out of university, thinking, okay, like where do I start now? And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got, which I was really happy with my university introducing me to this, was signing up to LinkedIn. So I obviously signed up to LinkedIn, I think maybe a year or so before I finished uni, started building some connections. And I think at the time, I still didn't really understand what LinkedIn was or how it could help me. So when I got to that point of needing to apply for graduate roles, I just started to apply to so many different roles at so many different places, all the big names you could think of. But actually, a lot of places didn't have the best career sites or the best graduate applications. So it did become quite draining and difficult to do these kind of applications, because obviously coming in as a graduate, there are so many other people in the same position as you and so many limited spaces. So I kind of understand in a way that people recruiting graduates, they do want to hear about you a lot. They do want to see a lot as well. Hence why the applications were very, very long for most of the places I applied for. But I actually got to grips with LinkedIn a bit more after university. And I kind of started to realize that I could connect with recruiters on there and start raising those conversations on what I was looking for. And this role I secured at Rightmove was actually for a recruiter. And that was my first experience of like, wow, like I've got my first role, and it literally came to me. A recruiter contacted me and, gave me the opportunity to tell her about myself. And then I got the opportunity to go into the Rightmove Assessment Centre and go for that graduate role. And from there on, I've literally been really big on LinkedIn and networking and building my connections. So I think networking is definitely a key thing.
Key.
Yeah, so key.
Did you have to do a lot of tech tests when you were applying for the graduate, or were you just mainly not getting beyond sort of filling out a form? How was that?
Yeah, so I would say I got through to a fair few tech tests and like in-person interviews, but not as many as I thought I would, considering the amount I applied for. Did a few tech tests and things like that. And most of them were assessment centers and other sorts of different interview styles as well. But yeah, I did do a lot of assessment centers and tests.
Do you think uni, I know obviously you hinted that they were proactive in suggesting LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Do you think uni prepared you well enough for what it's like in an assessment centre and sort of the application process? Do you feel like that's a gap, or do you think they covered it off?
Yeah, I feel like that was a bit of a gap. We did start to have more recruitment talks towards the end of our course, saying, okay, well, this is how interviews go. We've got all this interview advice available, and we had these like centers at uni where you could go and do these mock interviews, which was great. But I think they were more generic mock interviews, like for anyone to go to, whatever field you're in. There was none of that specific, okay, well, this is what you're going to face when going into software engineering. You're going to have these technical tests. They're going to ask you.
Is there a big deal? The technical
yeah, it's a big deal, and they are definitely not easy at all. And I think there's been a big shift now, but when I was at uni, finishing uni, obviously way before COVID, it was all in person as well. So it was, none of this over Zoom calls and stuff where you actually had your own space. And
that's you're right,
yeah, you actually were sitting in a room. I remember maybe one or two of them I was sitting in a room with one other person watching me just write code. And it was, for me, it was huge. Like, I feel like at the time I couldn't really think properly when someone's just there watching me do something, especially as big as, trying to get into a role that I wanted to get into. You just kind of forget everything and like, oh wait, like, what do I do now? It is very, very difficult.
I think people do that even once they're experienced, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's definitely not the reality of actually going into a software engineering job. So I think that's one other thing I found. I was so shocked that when I actually finally got into software engineering, you know, learning about the day-to-day and what my responsibilities are and how people around me work. Like, you have the most senior developers who, you know, use the internet, use Google, read docs constantly. And that's the thing about tech. You're never going to know how to do everything. You're always going to be constantly learning. And even if you've used, you know, a library before or whatever it is, it's not that you're using the same pieces of the same frameworks and tools constantly. You may use them once and then have to come back to that in a year and then sort of reteach yourself as well. So I think tech is very self-taught, and I think with a lot of the tech tests, it should definitely be more application based. And I think nowadays it is becoming that, where a lot of companies are saying, okay, well, it's open book, it's over Zoom. You know, if you need to use Google, use Google. If you need to use Docs, you can use Docs. You can ask us questions, and that's the nice shift that you're starting to see now. So yeah,
in no workspace does someone go, here you go, solve this in 15 minutes.
Yeah, no way, no way.